The Tea Biz podcast delivers tea news that you need to know. A recap of the week's major headlines with commentary and cultural trends hosted by Dan Bolton. It is the voice of origin for tea professionals and enthusiasts worldwide.
Think of us as a digital caravan of storytellers, bringing authentic, authoritative, and exclusive stories to you weekly from the tea lands. Hello, everyone. Here are this week's headlines. Kenya's price floor for tea is sagging. We look at troubled global tea exports, a tea in 22 forecast, and Finlays Cites Tea among its top beverage trends. More in a minute, but first, this important message.
What makes a perfect cup of Ceylon tea? The perfect cup is from the tea businesses that ensure the protection of all the children living within their tea estates. We salute Kailani Valley, Talawakili, Bogawanthalawa, Harana, and Elliptia tea estates. Support Save the Children, Sri Lanka.
Tea prices have firmed following the August decision to set a minimum for Kenya Tea Development Agency teas sold at the Mombasa auction. Kenya's Ministry of Agriculture set a price floor of $2.43 per kilo to rescue farmers from a multi-year price decline that in the first half of 2021 had averaged 203 Kenyan shillings per kilo. At one point, averages dipped to 186 Kenyan shillings per kilo, about $1.96 per kilo in U.S. dollars, a 10-year low. KTDA operates 69 factories and buys from 600,000 tea smallholders. The price was calculated as sufficient to cover production expenses, averting financial disaster for growers facing steep increases in the cost of energy and inputs like fertilizer. The price does not apply to buyers purchasing teas auctioned by other countries, including Rwanda and Tanzania. In September, prices rallied to a high of 256 Kenyan shillings, but by the end of October it was clear the floor was sagging. Prices have since remained above rock bottom, closing the year at $2.39 per kilo. Fortunately, the U.S. dollar has appreciated to the point that shillings are trading at an all-time low. Tea is purchased in U.S. dollars, resulting in an increase in foreign exchange earnings, according to reports in The Star. At $2.43 per kilo, Kenyan sellers currently receive 275 Kenyan shillings per kilo. Volume remains a concern. During the third quarter of 2021, exports totaled 124,500 metric tons, down from 138,600 metric tons during the same period in 2020, according to Kenya's National Bureau of Statistics. The Tea Directorate reports the quantity of green leaf delivered to factories through June dropped to 274 million kilos from 300 million kilos during the first half of 2020. Business Insight. As a global tea supplier, Kenya must contend with the fact that demand is slack due to the pandemic and that even commodity buyers, including Pakistan, Russia, and Yemen, favor better quality teas. The tea sector remains optimistic that reforms, which experienced a rough ride in 2021, will ultimately benefit growers. The pandemic shuffles tea export ranks. This is the fifth of a dozen tea in 22 forecasts for the new year. Tea demand is seemingly boundless, and while wave after wave of viral infections, lockdowns, and unprecedentedly costly logistics made headlines, in 2021 it was rising domestic consumption in producing countries that most impacted exports. By November 2021, China had already exceeded $2 billion in sales, securing its dominance in tea exports. Production is expected to top 2.8 million metric tons in 2021. 2 years of pandemic have reshuffled rankings among the tea-producing countries, with Turkey likely advancing to number 4. In export earnings, Sri Lanka, currently third, may advance to second. Kenya will likely fall to third, while India remains fourth. India, the world's second largest tea producer at 1.35 million metric tons, suffered the biggest setback in volume, but has benefited from better prices. Tea Board of India data through October indicates export earnings were up 2% to $577 million in 2021, despite a 9% decline in volume. Kenya experienced declines in volume and value. Earnings through October were down 9.1% compared to 2020, according to the National Board of Statistics. Exports in the third quarter fell to 27.7 billion Kenyan shillings, less than $245,000 US. In 2021, prices increased, but so have costs. Since the onset of COVID-19, the average price of a 40-foot shipping container increased by 323%. The tea supply chain is becoming more complex as blends incorporate more botanicals. Brands find themselves accountable for environmental and social impact at origin as consumers insist on sustainable and transparent sourcing. Wholesalers are reluctant to share the financial burden. While weather and prices are perpetual variables that rise and fall, consumption per capita climbs reliably year to year. India and China, the world's top tea producers, now account for 61% of global demand, according to the Economist Intelligence Unit. In China, consumption increased by double digits annually for the decade 2009 to 2019 and now stands at 1.6 kilos per person per year. India, famous for its street corner chai, accounts for 20% of global demand. In India, the average consumption per person is 840 grams per year. The share of output retained for domestic consumption globally, now at 70%, has increased from 58.4% since 2010. A brief recap of export follows. Be sure to visit the Tea Biz website for a more detailed analysis. China. Through November 2021, China's export authorities reported more than $2 billion in exports, an 11.5% increase in value, and a volume increase of 3.9% to 337,000 metric tons. China exported $2 billion in mainly green tea in 2020, according to UN Comtrade. Primary trade partners are concentrated along the Belt and Road, with Morocco, Uzbekistan, Ghana, Russia, and Mauritania the top 5. During the first 11 months of the year, China shipped 10,000 metric tons to America, up 11.7% in volume and 24% in value compared to 2020. China exports accounted for 36% of certified organic tea shipments to the U.S. in 2021. Sales of black tea were $388 million on 26,900 metric tons, up 1.35% by volume and 22% in value. Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka exported 288 million kilos in 2021, earning $1.32 billion despite a decline in volume. Exports were $1.2 billion in 2020, according to the Sri Lanka Tea Board. December totals are not yet available, but are expected to bring the cumulative harvest to 300 million kilos, compared to the 279 million kilos produced in 2020. Productivity is a concern. Sri Lanka has a much higher cost of production per hectare than Kenya or India. Yields have declined since October, an indication Sri Lanka is unlikely to top 300 million kilos in 2022, marking a long period of decline from 2013, when Sri Lanka produced a record 328 million kilos. A poor showing in 2022 means that Turkey will likely rank fourth among the world's top tea-producing countries, surpassing Sri Lanka at 312 million kilos, according to EIU estimates. Turkey ranks 34th among the world's tea exporting nations at $17 million, up 10.7% in 2020, according to Comtrade. Turkey's domestic market, where consumption per person is the highest in the world, drinks virtually all of the tea grown there. Kenya. Tea production declined in 2019 due to drought and then surged in 2020 out of sync with demand. In 2021, prices stabilized after a period of political turmoil. Late in the year, the country's tea growers once again found their footing. The new year began with a high note as auction prices averaged $2.45 on good volume. Firming prices are welcome relief following a year in which export earnings declined 9.1%. Kenya exported $1.22 billion worth of mainly black tea in 2020, according to Comtrade. India. Export volumes through October declined to 157 million kilos, down 8.7% compared to the 172 million kilos shipped during the same period in 2020. Volume declines were steeper in North India at 12%, according to the Tea Board of India data. Production fell to 6.5 million kilos in Darjeeling, down by half compared to the 13 million kilos harvested at the turn of the century. In South India, export volumes declined by 4%. India exported 692 million of mainly black tea in 2020, according to Comtrade. Finlays, a venerable name in tea since 1750, annually publishes a report on beverage trends. Tea is cited prominently as both an ingredient and a beverage in this year's top 2 trends. A brief recap follows. Visit Finlay's website or the Tea Biz blog to download the free 18-page report, Global Beverage Trends 2022. Finlay's lists the science of health and well-being as its number 1 trend. Health credentials are the dominant driver in a pandemic-scarred world, according to the report. 54% of consumers pay a, quote, high amount of attention to the ingredient lists on the products they consume. Finlays notes that in the past, brands mainly communicated health credentials by describing positive benefits like boost and revitalizes. Quote, we're now seeing greater inclusion of active ingredients such as caffeine or L-theanine, through which the perceived benefits are reinforced, reads the report. Quote, tea is rich in these bioactive compounds, which are growing in recognition with consumers. The report cited one example, a survey of 22,000 consumers that found 63% believe that green tea or matcha has a positive impact on their health. Since 2016, beverage launches highlighting tea compounds such as e.g. CG, L-theanine, polyphenols, and catechins have increased 30%. Trend number 2. Natural energy goes mainstream. The number of energy drinks launched with, quote, all natural claims has increased 178% since 2016, according to Mintel's Global New Product Database. Green tea is popular as a natural source of caffeine in a range of energy drinks from shots to seltzers. Quote, greater levels of urbanization and increasingly busy lifestyles have driven high levels of historic growth in the energy drink category. Clean energy brands like Runa, Matcha Bar Hustle, and Tenzing are trending, according to Finlays. The report notes that 66% of female consumers believe that energy drinks feel both unhealthy and unnatural, versus 45% of men. Business Insight. What's next? Finlays predicts beverages with natural ingredients that enhance concentration and mental focus will emerge as the next phase in energy drink innovations, so long as formulations avoid the jitters and caffeine crash. Quote, we also expect to see greater reference to nootropics in the energy drink category. Caffeine and L-theanine are natural examples. End quote. Aravinda Anantharaman in Bengaluru reports on this week's tea auction prices.
India Tea Price Report for the week ending 15th January 2022. 2022 has already started with a lot of change brewing in the industry. Sri Lanka has proposed to pay off their oil debts to Iran with orthodox tea exports and in a barter trade agreement. All eyes are on it to see how it will impact India's tea exports because Iran is one of the top importers of Indian tea. In 2019, Iran imported 53 million kilos of tea from India. This has dropped in the last 2 years, so it remains to be seen how 2022 will fare. Within India, the Tea Board seems to be actively pursuing reforms, and a draft Tea Promotion and Development Bill 2022 is expected to be passed. And in prices, Sale 2 in North India was not much different from Sale 1 in terms of percentages and prices. Gardens have closed for winter. And in South India, Sale 2 proceeded in the new format of Bharat auctions.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Q-Trade understands that a successful tea blend goes beyond the creative fusion of appearance, aroma, and flavor. Our multi-award-winning product development team is passionate about converting natural ingredients into sensory experiences that customers crave. Every recipe is formulated with a commercial backbone of dependable quality sourcing with a pricing structure that supports a safe, regulated, profitable, and scalable blend. Q-Trade meets every brand's retail, food service, and e-commerce need. For more information, visit our website, qtradeteas.com.
This week, Tea Biz travels to Bengaluru, where India Chief Correspondent Aravinda Anantharaman reviews a momentous year for the tea industry in a country that produces 20% of the world's tea. Her report is the sixth in the series of Tea in 22 year-end reviews and forecasts.
Reorganizing and Reinvigorating India's tea sector, a Tea in 22 India forecast. India's tea industry in 2021 recovered from severe setbacks due to the pandemic. Production totals rebounded in 2021, but exports lagged as global prices fell and logistics costs soared. A shortage of containers led to high freight costs. Export volume declined to a 5-year low of less than 200 million kilos. Kenya undercut prices at auction for commodity black teas. Fortunately, India's domestic demand remains firm, consuming 75% of locally grown tea. The year saw the pilot of the Japanese auction model, now named the Bharat auction, that launched in South India in January 2022. Tea Board of India Chairman P.K. Bezboruah reports that high-quality teas sold at 150% premium over medium-quality teas. Start quote, the path forward for the organized sector is to focus on quality, therein shines the silver lining, end quote, he told the Times of India. Tea Biz asked tea industry stakeholders Anshuman Kanoria, Chairman Balaji Agro International, Head of India Tea Exporters Association, and owner of Tindharia, Goomtee and Jungpana Gardens in Darjeeling, and Pranav Bhansali, Managing Partner, Bhansali Co. What to expect in 2022? Production and prices. The last 2 years came with severe disruptions because of the pandemic, and production was impacted in 2020, less in 2021. The other disruptor was climate change, as weather has become unpredictable. Unseasonal rainfall and prolonged drought has been extremely challenging. Says Bhansali, I think weather-related concerns are here to stay. North and South Indian rains have become unpredictable, and this has had an impact on prices as well as demand-supply dynamics. Production volumes are expected to increase. According to Kanoria, with the small growers producing more, we can see the usual uptick in production and around the same growth in domestic consumption. Both Bhansali and Kanoria are concerned with oversupply of medium and lower teas. Bhansali estimates that 2022 may see record production figures if other disruptions are contained. In exports, the pandemic greatly impacted India's CTC exports because of low prices offered by African suppliers. Due to the rising cost of production, CTC faces competitive challenges in global markets, but just how much will depend on the other suppliers. Bhansali said that Sri Lanka's temporary ban on the use of chemical fertilizers and Kenya's minimum floor price indicate that governments are making bold decisions which could impact the entire industry. Reforms, says Bhansali, start quote, there have been a lot of naysayers for this new system. I think it's important to recognize that tea has and cannot be treated like a commodity market instrument because of its inherent nature of not being standardized. Differing in his views, garden owner and exporter Anshuman Kanoria said, quote, the existing auction system was working fine, and the producers that complain about it are largely those who have quality issues or who dump leftover teas into the system. The focus should have been on improving the auction functioning and competition infrastructure rather than the rules, end quote. In 2022, the Tea Board has signaled that it will move ahead with reforms. Some of what's being asked of it include 1. Regulate the import of duty-free tea into India that was intended for re-exports but has instead been dumped in the domestic market. There is a need to ensure that all tea exported as Indian tea must contain 100% Indian tea. 2. Ensure Nepal tea is not passed off as Darjeeling tea, which includes regulation and testing of all Nepal tea entering India. 3. The FSSAI must tighten the laws for maximum residue levels so that more tea is in line with EU norms and therefore boost demand. 4. Dissociate from auctions and hand over the running of the auction to respective auction committees that already exist, and the modern manner of conducting such auctions to be at the discretion of stakeholders. And lastly, Tea Board needs to be remodeled to become a promotion and development directorate rather than an over-regulator.
Intrigued by what you heard in today's podcast? Would you like to learn more from our global network of Tea Biz journalists and tea experts? Remember to visit the Tea Biz website for more comprehensive coverage. That's www.t-biz.com. Thanks for listening. Farewell till next week.